Hello, my name's Andy Taylor, and it is my privilege to be sharing this walk through the Psalms again with you this week. The psalm we're looking at this week is Psalm 57. It's a miktam, which nobody seems to know quite what that means, but it's probably a song or a poem, and it's attributed to David when he was hidden in a cave fleeing from Saul. Now, I love David. He's one of my favourite Bible characters. He made many mistakes, but when King Saul failed, God sent Samuel to seek a man after God's own heart. And the man he came up with was David, 15-year-old boy. Hadn't been to the military academies of Israel. He'd spent his life sitting on the hillsides of Bethlehem looking after his father's sheep. But there God set in him all the principles to be the greatest king of Israel. And David, he was a man after God's own heart. And in this psalm, he's being chased by Saul, and Saul wants to kill him. So he's fleeing from Saul, and he finds respite in a cave. So in that cave, he's got some temporary respite, somewhere to rest with his men, away from Saul. Now, I'm not a musician or a poet, but even if I was fleeing for my life and hiding in a cave, would I be writing poetry and songs? I don't know. But this was David. And I think the beauty of this was that even in the most dire circumstances, David sought the Lord and he tried to find God's place. And he would rehearse all the issues that he's in. This is a lament psalm. All the problems that he's experiencing. But in that, he puts God in his place and presents it all to the Lord. So he says this: "Have mercy, O God. Have mercy on me, for in you my soul takes refuge. I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings until the disaster has passed." So he's already said, I'm here, but my real safety, my protection comes from God. His heart's changing. He's beginning to look upwards rather than at his situation. And he says, I cry out to God Most High, to God who fulfills his purposes for me. He sends from heaven and saves me. And then he says, I'm in the midst of lions. I lie amongst ravenous beasts, men whose teeth are spears and arrows, whose tongues are sharp swords. But then he comes back. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be above all the earth. They spread a net for my feet. I was bowed down in distress. They dug a pit in my path, but they've fallen in it themselves. I will praise you, O Lord, among the nations. I will sing of you among the peoples. For great is your love, reaching to the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the skies. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be above all the earth. There I am in the midst of all my problems. I exalt God. And it does something within us and changes our hearts. Now, we read another thing about an event where David was running away from Saul. And he does this. He's running away from Saul and he finds a cave and he hides in a cave. And then his men are with him and he hides in the cave. This is 1 Samuel 24. And Saul comes in to relieve himself. Now Saul would have been very vulnerable on his own, relieving himself in a cave. And David's men are around him saying, God's delivered him into our hands. Let's get him. That's it. Let's get him. And David says no. And he just goes up and he cuts a little piece off Saul's cloak, just as evidence to Saul that he'd been at David's mercy. But even then he's ashamed of what he's done. And he says, "The Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, or lift my hand against him, for he is the anointed of the Lord." And he wouldn't touch Saul. And Saul gets up and goes out, and David cries to him, look where you've been. Saul has to walk away in his shame. But David, even though David was the Lord's anointed, he wouldn't harm Saul. So I think that is amazing. And you see, I think it's that time he spent with the Lord in the back of the cave changes his heart from vengeance to one of mercy and grace. God changes his heart and his mind. So instead of wreaking his vengeance on Saul, he offers grace and mercy. And I think there's a real lesson for us in life that we should seek right in the depths, and we do tell God how awful things can be. But in the depths of that, we need to lift our hearts to him, and he changes our hearts. And we behave differently. We don't behave, as it says elsewhere in the Psalms, like a brute beast before him, but we honour him. Now, before I finish, I just wanted to say something about this week. I had the privilege of conducting a funeral for one of God's heroes. Here she is, Glynis Pascal. Probably quite a few of you will know Glynis. Glynis was born with spina bifida. The doctor said to her parents that she wouldn't last the first night. She did. They said she wouldn't last after 7 years. She did. They said she wouldn't reach adulthood. She did. In fact, Glynis died at the age of 73. And she was an amazing woman. She had so much difficulty all her life with calipers and crutches and chairs and pain. But she wouldn't let her disability stop her from doing anything. She went on mission. She went to Romania. She went to Israel, Kenya on mission teams. She travelled the world on holidays. Her education was not geared towards high academic achievement. So she didn't have many. She had the qualifications to become a typist coming out of school. But later on she got an MA in personnel management and worked as a personnel manager for a number of years. Latterly, she fostered young offenders, and these young men would come and live with her in her home. And she was like a mother to them. And at the funeral, 2 of them were there. 2 of them, and they loved her. They adored Glynis. They were so gutted that she died. And they testified to what she meant to them. She called them her sons, and they called her mum, their mum. Glynis was an amazing woman, and she was always cheerful. But we had a great day at the funeral, with the funeral itself and the Thanksgiving. It was a marvellous day, and there was more laughter than there was tears when people recounted the escapades and different things that Glynis got into, because nothing was going to stop her doing what she wanted to do. She was an amazing woman. She always had a smile on her face. She was always there up for fun. And I just want to honour Glynis, because she was the epitome of this. In the midst of all the troubles, in the midst of it all, Glynis reached out to her Lord, and she lived life to the full, and she had a great life. So I just want to honour her before you all. Thank you for listening to me.